Welcome to Fire and Life Talk, transforming a world one heart at a time.
Hello and welcome to Fire and Life Talk. We just thank you for joining in today, and we just want to send a shout out and thanks to all of our subscribers. And if you're watching for the first time, you are in for a great show, but we ask you to subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. But especially today, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to tune in. We'll try to get your questions on the screen. We don't have a call-in feature just yet, so hopefully the platform will do some justice and we'll get that done. But today we got an awesome show, and the title of the show is Finding Peace, exploring the intersection between mental health, emotional health, and faith. Again, awesome show. We'll be bringing on the CEO and founder of J Intelligence, Khmer Baker. KB is in the studio today. We're excited, but before we get to that, we want to bring in our co-host. Y'all know how we do it. Proverbs 18:22. When a man finds, he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtains favor in the Lord. So I want to introduce to you my good thing. What's up, good thing?
Hello. I can say I am truly blessed because you are in my life.
Oh, watch out. We always try to start something when we get on camera. But that's all right, though. That's all right. That's all right. I appreciate it. You know, we're looking forward to talking with our guest today. And it's going to be on the subject of emotional and mental health, which is great because that seems to be a buzzword today, I could say, but it's real. It's real. So we're going to dive into that today. And again, our show is about being encouraged, being empowered, and being equipped for living a better life, an abundant life.
Yes.
Let's go on and bring in the guest. I ain't fooling
with
you.
Let's do that. Let's bring in our guest,
KB. The founder, CEO, J Intelligence, KB. Khmer Baker. How you doing today, Ms. Baker?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be in your presence, speak with you, and just seeing your joy and your confidence and talking about God.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. You're welcome. And I'm gonna tell you, we to our audience, we were talking before the show, so I'm going to extend and tell you, welcome anytime. You're welcome anytime. You come in, and we haven't known you but a short time, but you're like family and have that kindred spirit. So we appreciate you. But for our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yes, I am the CEO and founder of J Intelligent Networks. And what we do, we provide faith-based educational programs for emotional mental health and emotional healing. And this came actually from my own healing journey. I endured a traumatic childhood. And as I grew and matured, there were just things that was residual in my being, in my life, because of not dealing with that trauma and getting the appropriate help. And even though I am a person of faith, there became a moment where what I was being and doing was conflicting with my walk with God. And so I needed just to take a step back and say, hey, what is really going on? How can I be the person that God is calling me to be? How can my identity be formed around Him versus my trauma that I had experienced?
Yeah, that's big. That's big. It sounds as though that's where you got your passion from from your actual experience? Could we
That
say?
and yeah, that and the mere fact that I love talking about God. So you got two bonuses there. So
Are you in the right
anytime
place?
you say God, I was like, "Hey, what's going on? Let's talk about it."
Are you in the right place?
Yeah, yeah. And it was during that journey where I was able to just see his character more clearly instead of through the lens of my suffering, if you want to call it as such. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's good because we encourage everyone to check your identity.
Mhm.
Who
Yes.
who are we emulating?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can get so caught up in our culture. Our culture becomes our identity. We can get caught up in our profession. Our profession becomes our identity.
Mhm.
Even in the church, you know,
Mhm.
we just take on different forms of identity. And unfortunately, some of us take on the negative things as our
Mhm.
identity and what
Mhm.
people have called us and labeled us and
Mhm.
things of those natures. So yeah, so tell us more about this journey that caused you to start Jay and Tell.
Yes. Again, because I'm so passionate about healing and the things that I learned on my journey for healing, I realized that everybody else needs to know this too. And that inspired me to say, hey, let's come together and create programs that address these dimensions of healing, that addresses our mental health, that addresses our emotional health. But since I am a person of faith, what does that look like to have God along the journey? And for my personal walk, it took me time to even get comfortable with seeking additional support because I grew up in the environment where praying alone was enough or was supposed to be, but I was crazy. And so being able to say, hey, let me get some more help, those who have experience with dealing with emotional mental health, seeking a therapist, seeking a counselor, and in that setting be able to unravel those traumatic events and address those wounds, and then in the midst of that come closer to God because I wasn't hiding behind poor behavior choices. And so our programs, they're fun, they're interactive, and it brings to light emotional wellness and mental health in a manner where it's digestible and it's removing that stigmatism of, oh, I have a problem. And it again, it is something that resonates personally with me. And because it does, it overflowed with how can I help others with this information?
So, Khmer,
Mhm.
how, why do you think it's so important to heal the mindset?
Yes. So the brain is quite fascinating. It's an incredible, I think, organ that the Lord provided us. But what happens with our experiences, personal, that are hurtful, we it stays in our brain, and our brain holds on to it, and it kind of resonates there for a while until you give it something new to address or focus on. And so when you're not dealing with those elements, our brain gets stuck and attached to those hurtful experiences to the point that it will manifest and allow you to relive those experiences because you haven't recoded it to something that's healthier and something that is more fulfilling and life-giving in who you are as an individual.
Yeah, that's awesome right there because the Bible talks about be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that, and I always say this, that it doesn't start in your elbow or your knee.
Mhm.
Everything starts in your mind,
Yeah.
That's
in
right.
your brain, and how it functions. And we have to understand who we are, how our makeup,
Mhm.
and again, what is the outer things that affect us.
Mhm.
Um, and you mentioned, I want to talk more about JTail just for a moment because it's a very powerful vision that you have. So you mentioned some of the different programs that you have and the
Mhm.
interactions. Can you give us some more detail on that?
Yes. So we have two programs in particular that I'm always excited about. One is called Stronger You. And in that program, we actually go and reach out in our local community senior base. And in that program, we teach habits, emotional wellness habits, and just to equip them to see the good within themselves because they're at a different age demographic and sometimes they can be overlooked. And so that program, we come in, spend 10 weeks throughout the year, and we just give them principles for emotional health, mental health, in addition to great Bible study, because again, I love that Bible. And then our second program is Living Free to Be Me, and that's a nationwide program. And that program walks a person through healing from emotional wounds from past experiences. And that's a
Wow.
7-week program. And we just take them through the journey of how to release those experiences. We do healthy brain stimulation so that we're recoding our brain in the process of that. And then we go
Yes.
through a repair phase where we're addressing self-forgiveness and just really identifying our talents, our truths, our values, and getting us recentered to how God had created us in the beginning before these experiences kind of hijacked us.
That sounds like you actually addressed the total man in mankind in making us whole. I mean, that should be our purpose in life because we have to realize that we live in a fallen world. We live in a broken world, and sometimes we get caught in the cracks of that brokenness. So, yeah, that's why I wanted you to share more. And I'm going to put that back on the screen again. This is how you can get more information from Khmer Baker and the vision that God has given her and has blessed her with the resources and everything to get this up and running. That people can have an outlet and a place to reach. Do you have any corporate sponsors by chance?
Oh, we're always looking for them. So if you're watching and you want to support a small nonprofit, we need your help. So come our way. Because one of the things, too, what we're trying to accomplish or are accomplishing is removing that stigmatism and just creating a safe environment to start the conversation. And doing it in the way where you see that you're not the only one, but being also able to learn from others through their journey and together receive a more fulfilling experience and growth because you're able to learn from someone else as well.
Yeah, Khmer, what are some of the warning signs of mental health?
I think I used the phrase before, crazy. but nobody wants to identify with that.
Right.
So from a smaller scale point, because I say that because of my own journey, that there was a piece of where people were like, Khmer, you're just a little bit off. You may want to go get that checked out. So some of the warning signs would be poor sleeping habits, either sleeping too much or sleeping not enough. Poor eating habits, where you're just eating things out of comfort, inability to engage in life, where you just get to a place where you don't feel comfortable to do much of anything, but maybe just go to work and come home. That's a big sign right there, especially in the aspect of just not taking care of yourself physically or mentally, where anything you do is in excess, but it's not something where you're trying to care for your mind, body, and spirit. Another one, which I share numerously, is just even how are you engaging with other people, especially dealing with anger. If you're a person who gets angry very quickly, and other things in terms of how you engage with people where you're getting or you feel as though someone is out to get you, or you have a high level of inability to trust someone, those are all signs or indications that there's something else that's going on that requires a little bit more attention to your emotional and mental well-being.
Wow. You were going down that list, and I was checking a few myself. I was like, hold on, don't let me fill in all the blanks. But, so I'm gonna check out the website, see what you got to offer. I mean, just being real, because the environment that we live in, we have to pay attention to those things. Like you said, simple things like lack of sleep, irritability. How do you interact or if you interact with other people at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic, we went on a lockdown, and that was tough for some people.
Mhm.
You know,
Yes.
wait, and Pastor Gina, I know you got a question, but I want to say this. It's funny. Well, it's funny to me, but it's just the realness of it. We had a lady said that she would go to funerals
Mm.
just social interaction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she
Mhm.
missed the interaction. So I thought it was very creative myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
Me personally, I ain't walking up in all them funerals. But anyway, Pastor Jackson, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit on trauma, because I know that sometimes we experience trauma in our lives and
Mhm.
we disregard how the effects of that
Mhm.
is on us. So,
Mhm.
can you elaborate on that a little bit about trauma?
Yeah. So with trauma, again, the brain does a unique way of trying to protect us from it. And one of the things that it does is kind of isolate those experiences, kind of put it in the back of your brain until you're able to handle it in a better fashion where you can grow and mature from it. But while it's in the back, unfortunately, it will seep out slowly but surely in how you're going about your day to day. Meaning, for myself, I had an intense anger problem. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm so angry all the time. And it wasn't until I took a step back to evaluate my previous experiences to say, okay, oh, that anger is stemming from that childhood trauma. And and because of that, it's overflowing in my relationships with other people, new relationships. I'm always finding that trauma in new relationships because it's still coded in my brain. And so the problem with not dealing with it is that at a time it will come out when you least expect it. And for me, when it came out in the form of a mental breakdown. Like I just couldn't function anymore. And as I matured and got the help that I needed, I realized it was because God wanted me to release those experiences. But instead of releasing it, I was holding on and stuffing it. And so he does it very, I find it, he doesn't do it until you're ready to address it.
Mhm.
And that's something that's very kind of him because it could be ongoing all the time, but he takes a step back and says, okay, well, you're probably not ready just yet. So he'll give you like a little hint. And then if you don't take those hints, he's like, okay, now you just need to take on this experience and deal with it. But it can also come out in terms of your physical well-being. So
Yeah.
you may start having physical ailments or in terms of anxiety. If you struggle with
Right.
anxiety, usually that anxiety stems from a place of previous experiences where you didn't have the opportunity to deal with it. So that's your body's way of coding it and storing those experiences.
Yeah, that's powerful.
That is good.
You mentioned the power of the mind and the protection elements, those things that are in place. It reminded me of a young lady that we ministered to years ago, and this is just an example of the power of the mind. Um, that she was getting abused every day.
Mm. Mhm.
Her husband would come home and beat her at 4 o'clock every day, and that's something that no one should
Mhm.
play around with
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
hesitate with.
Mhm.
I know back in the day, the church would say, "Oh, baby, we praying for you."
Mhm.
No, get
Mhm.
out of that element, and
Mhm.
and that's what we were led to do. But she didn't want to go
Mhm.
because she had fear of leaving that false or deceptive comfort zone.
Mm.
She
Mhm.
said, "I know my husband's gonna beat me at 4 o'clock, but if I leave out of here and go to a shelter or go to someone else, I don't know what's gonna happen."
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we lost contact with her. We just prayed for her well-being. But I tell you what, Khmer, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, let's discuss some things that we can do to
Mhm.
Yes.
alleviate these problems that some of us are experiencing. We'll be right back. Don't forget to comment, to subscribe, to stay tuned. We'll be coming back with KB, Khmer Baker, with so much more.
The sun rose and work began. Word of a better day spread throughout the people. A day free from bondage. This hope carried them through their labor. They knew their God was faithful, that he had a plan, one to set them free, to a land promised by God, to his people, for his people. A plan of redemption, but they lost focus. Turned away from the God who was faithful, worshipped false idols, turned back to the very culture God was rescuing them from, turned back to their past, to bondage. So they wandered and wandered. They began to grumble and curse the God who rescued them. They would never set foot in the land they were promised. They would never be unleashed. But God's plan perseveres despite the disobedience of his people. He waited for a new generation to rise up from the dust, one that would step out from their wandering and into the purpose for which God was calling them, to be a nation set apart that would bring glory to him. He continues to call those courageous followers out of the desert, away from our wanderings, to be God's representatives here on earth, to be unleashed from the bondage of our past, unleashed from being brainwashed by culture, unleashed with the backbone to lead the church, unleashed with the boldness to serve the world, unleashed for the gospel. He calls his people to be unleashed.
We are back. You tuning in to Fire and Life Talk, and we're having a great conversation with Khmer Baker and my good thing, the co-host, Pastor Gina. We're all in the studio together, and we're talking about a very serious subject about emotional and mental health. And Khmer is the founder and CEO of J Intelligence. And I didn't get to the question, the first segment, but what does the J stand for?
Oh, Jesus.
All right. Now.
Yes, Jesus.
I can't think of no other name that's higher.
Yeah.
Other name that's better.
Yeah,
Amen.
we are a faith-based organization,
Yes.
but within the Jesus aspect, we are what I call dropping intel in terms of just how to be okay with ourselves, and as we've been talking about today, our emotional and mental health as well.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know we had a comment. There's a good friend of ours, Dr. Margot. She's actually in the Bahamas. So Dr. Margot and I, we've talked briefly on this subject some time ago, and what she says is so true and is so important. So again, we just want to thank you, even in the midst of the middle of the show. Thank you for coming on and sharing this,
Yes.
because it is such a vital topic. But before we left, we said we're going to come back and talk about some healing properties and some ways to reach out for help or to get help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think the first step is being okay with saying I need help.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually the first step of any 12-step program, is the mere fact that there's things that's happening outside of your power, and you're powerless to it. And so many times in my journey, I went backwards because I didn't want to admit that I needed help, because I was functioning. I was doing well. I was being successful. But in that midst of my idealism of success, I was still hurting inwardly. And so if you're in a place where no matter what you do, at the end of the day, inwardly, you're still hurting, that's an indication to seek more help. And one of the things that I talk about numerously is finding safe communities to do that with. Not everyone is equipped, and that's totally fine. We all have different gifts and talents. One of the things that, of course, I'm a proponent of is seeking out coaches, seeking out therapists, social workers who have the tools and the capacity to sit down with you and work through how to have healthy coping mechanisms, how to retrain your brain, the cognitive therapy, those elements that you don't necessarily have by yourself. Because if you did, you'll be okay. But being able to seek those individuals who have those tools to guide you through that process. And in any circumstance, even in terms of a friendship or relationship, you dig, you seek. And sometimes
Yeah,
that friend
yeah,
doesn't work the first time, and that's
right.
okay. But it doesn't necessarily mean to give up altogether and stop finding the support that you need.
That's good. I'm glad you said that because, excuse me, my next question was, um, how do you know a counselor or a coach or is a good fit?
Yeah. And so, like as you are on a job interview, they're asking you those questions to see if you are a good fit for that job. And that's the same type of manner or what I call investigative hat that you should have when you're working or trying to learn about a therapist is asking those questions like what are your principles for guiding someone through this aspect of their life? What methodologies are you using? For me, one of the things that I did and that I didn't do the first time I saw sport, I didn't pray through it first. And so when I went there, the person wasn't a good fit. And it was like, but then the second time I said, let me put God first and allow him to guide me to the right person. And when I did that, I was able to find the person who could meet my needs. And so just even looking on their website or if you're having a conversation
Yeah,
with them, to get in that conversation, you can kind of tell if they're listening, if they're able to provide good healthy feedback, and if you feel safe. If you don't feel safe and you don't feel heard, then okay, that's probably not the best person you need to communicate with.
Yes.
yeah, I know. Also, too, is have someone that gives you homework.
Very important. Yes. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I'm just, you're absolutely correct because I had a friend who stopped going to her therapist because she didn't give her homework.
Yeah, yeah, and that puts you really uh, integral
Hmm.
in your recovery, so to speak, on your journey.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I found in talking with people that that's very vital. You
Hmm.
know that you can have homework, but also you can understand and measure your
Hmm.
improvement.
Yeah.
You know, or measure where you're at. You
Yeah.
know, on that journey. So that's very important.
Yeah.
And Pastor Gene, I know that you had something as well.
Yes, I wanted to ask. I know that there are people that are watching. That
Mhm.
maybe there's someone in your life that you know has emotional, mental, or maybe even some trauma, uh, and you talk to them maybe. And I would like to ask you,
Mhm.
Khmer, why do we refuse help when we have mental issues?
Oh, I compare it to the diabetic who know they're not supposed to be eating sugar, and yes, they do it.
Yeah.
In anything, and even food, right?
Right.
When you know, oh, that's not going to be good, but you run out and you do it. And so, from a mental standpoint, I think society has added a lot to it as well. As I stated in the beginning, crazy, because who wants to be identified as
Right.
crazy? And so, but that's usually the extreme case of mental illness, right? And so we think, oh, well, I'm not at that extreme case. I'm not at that crazy state. So I'm okay. And so there's a piece of just minimizing as well what you need in terms of help.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And what are some sources of help?
Well, as we talked about before, of course, seeking out a mental health provider,
Right.
therapist, social worker, counselor, but just even to, there's a lot of things that you can do proactively in learning about brain,
Yeah.
how your brain works, how to recode it, spending time learning about the value of sleeping, spending time and learning about your overall well-being and how that contributes to your mental health.
Right.
And so it's just not being fearful to find those resources and to investigate.
Right. You know, I found this on your, I think it was on your website, and it says your mindset is the compass
Mhm.
that guides you through the storms of chronic illness.
Mhm.
It helps you combat the lies that try to define your suffering. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, so in that particular passage, I think we just did a series on mindfulness.
Uh-huh.
And in that series, we just talked about how can I be more in tune with who I am from an emotional place, a mental place. And in those moments and in that place, sometimes we're bombarded by the non-truth. And Gary already talked about this earlier in terms of society, the images that we see, the conversations that we've had, and and then after a while, it's easy to believe those lies. And then from a spiritual standpoint, we all know who is the father of lies. And
Yeah.
so when we are in that state where we're allowing lies to dictate our well-being, we're actually listening to Satan. And in those listening to him, he's guiding us down the path of untruth. And so when we can get back, Gary had already referred to that passage about renewing your mind. When we can get back to God's truth and combating those lies, we let go that capture that's being played in our brains, and then not only playing, but then eventually overflowing to how we're actually living our life.
Yes. I got one word out of that: captivity.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
And since we brought old Slewfoot up, that's his purpose, is to captivate and torture
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
personally, I was in a space where I would just replay and replay
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
replay and replay the trauma. And it was like my brain, physically and spiritually, was in chains.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
know that I'm not the only one that experienced those things,
Mhm.
And so, so I guess what I'm getting at is that we have to seek help.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to develop and maintain a prayer life.
Mhm.
But we also, the Bible says, in everything we get understanding.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, so if we get anxiety, if we're not sleeping, why? Get an
Mhm.
understanding.
Mhm.
And I've learned personally the benefits
Mhm.
of seeking out help and things of that nature. But I know we may have some listeners here in the U.S. or around the world that say, well, I would love to do that. I see some inconsistencies in some places where I need help, but I can't afford it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What would you say with someone with that situation or condition or challenge?
Yeah. And I mean, that is actually what spurred our nonprofit on, was to be able to provide resources that is financially conducive to what's going on. And so I think in that particular case, if you're not coming to us and taking our programs, it starts small again with reading. There's plenty of things that you can pick up about mental health, about, again, your brain, to start having that dialogue to understand what's going on, and during that time saving up to go speak to someone or finding a support group. The support groups are usually a lot cheaper than seeking a one-on-one therapist. And in that support group, they still have tools that you can put to your everyday life to kind of guide you through that hurdle that you're experiencing. So again, being investigative, reading, finding
Yeah.
that support group, saving up, seeing if that therapist can offer a scholarship where you don't have to pay the full amount, but not being afraid to have that conversation.
Yes. I tell you what, Khmer, there's a subject I know we talked about off camera. I'm
Mhm.
excited to get to.
Mhm.
So when we come back, let's talk about that intersection. Well, let's put it like this: where mental and emotional health meets crosses with faith.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it together.
No problem.
So when we come back, we're gonna talk about different conditions of the brain versus
Yes.
conditions of someone's mind. And we'll be right back again. Thank you for tuning in to Fire and Life Talk. We'll be right. We'll be right back with KB Khmer Baker. Welcome back to Fire and Life Talk. We have our special guest today, Khmer Baker. We're talking emotional, mental health, and faith. Um, you're just giving us some great information, some great encouragement. I wanted to take the time to say that, there's a stipulation in certain communities about seeking, help for mental health. But I just want to encourage someone that if you're dealing with that, break through that stipulation, break through that stigma,
Mhm.
break through that fear, and seek help. And like Khmer said, if that didn't work, keep seeking out, keep reading books, keep seeking. I can't say it enough. I can't say it enough. But Khmer, part of your program is the faith base that you talk about. Can
Mhm.
you tell us more about that intersection, that vision that God has given you and that you've implemented to help people concerning the faith-based side of it?
Sure. In in my journey, one of the things that I wrestled with was my own shame and guilt,
Hmm.
and bringing that shame and guilt into my relationship with God. And because that shame and guilt was so powerful, it was difficult to see that God still loved me, wanted to have a relationship with me, and wanted the best for me. But when I read the Bible, I see a God who continues to love and is very merciful, very gracious. And sometimes we don't hear enough of that aspect of Him to know that He wants us to come to Him and to release those things that is burdening us. When I think about in the Old Testament, when the Israelites was sinning, And God was like, I know you sent it, but just come to me so that you can become and do something different. And unfortunately, when we deal with those aspects of ourselves, we naturally think, okay, well, he doesn't want to be with me, so let me just walk away from him. And
Yeah.
when that happens, we kind of end up being paralyzed, so to speak, because even though we may address our deep-seated issues from a trauma perspective, well, we lost God in the process.
That's right.
And God is like, no, I'm here with you. I want you to be on this journey with you. And I'm actually providing these resources. So just acknowledge me in the process. But some of us also have experienced, hey, I've reached out to laypersons or individuals in my church, and they didn't have the tools to help me. And in fact, they make things worse. And so then that's another reason why I will walk away from my relationship with God. And it's so sad because God is like, I want you. I want to be
Right.
with you.
Right.
I want to make sure that you have what you need to get through this next part of that journey. And one of the things that I found for myself is that when God was in the picture, my healing journey was exponentially growing. Like I was growing
Yeah.
because I allowed him into that journey. And so for our organization, we're like, hey, let's bring God back into the conversation, but in a safe way, not from those
Yes.
previous experiences, but in the manner of that he's with us, that he gave us emotions to begin with. He already
Yes.
talked about the brain because he created it.
Yeah.
So how can I feel safe with him as I take this journey?
Yeah.
And again, one of the things that I've learned is that they both intersect. They both complement one another because God cares about our overall well-being.
Yes. And everything you mentioned, that brings us into a balance,
Mhm.
Yes.
and a wholeness, and that's where God wants us to be. And in the midst of what you said too, is God comforts us.
Mhm.
Yes,
Like
he
you said,
does.
He knows there's nothing hidden from Him. He knows the
Mhm.
condition that we're in. But again, I go back to sometimes we have to understand,
Mhm.
how we got there, where we at, how we got there.
Mhm.
I've learned on a personal level that, when I thought my life was so bad, you
Mhm.
know, and dealing with physical ailments, I found that it was just a chemical imbalance.
Mhm.
That I
Mhm.
would eat a banana and feel better. And sometimes it's just not that simple,
Yeah.
but sometimes we're missing the nutrients,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
or we have a chemical imbalance that meds could take care of.
Yeah.
But there's an extreme side to that too. But we have to find out what we're going through as individuals, and
Yeah.
everything doesn't work for everyone. But
Mhm.
also too, I wanted to bring up we have to address that some things are a sin nature.
Mhm.
And but I don't want to, because we've talked about this before, but I don't want to. Sin is a burden, but I don't
Mhm.
want to condemn anyone in this conversation. We
Mhm.
just know that when you come to God, a lot of times, like you were saying, we turn away from God because we feel
Mhm.
so filthy and dirty and
Mhm.
condemned. But like you said, God is a comforter. God welcomes us in. If we
Mhm.
make that move, He'll make a way out of no way. He make
Yes.
every crooked thing straight in our lives. He's a mind regulator.
Mhm.
He's
Yes.
a proponent for a
Yes.
sound mind. But if we just seek Him,
Yes.
He promised that we'll find Him.
Yeah, and I would like to add with the sin component, one of the things that I've seen and witnessed is if you're in a situation where you feel as though you no longer have control, like you don't have the discipline to address that sinful nature, more likely there's deep-seated issues or experiences that you dealt with or you didn't deal with, and it's
Yeah,
surfacing and it's overflowing in these sinful behaviors. And so it can be an indicator to say, hey, I need to go see what is the root cause for this behavior.
Right.
yeah,
I know this isn't what God wants of me, but there's something there that's nagging at me that's keeping me trapped in this behavior. I need to go figure out what is behind, what is the root of all these things.
Yeah, and that's good. Again, that's that process about getting the understanding. And God allows those triggers to
Mhm.
say, hey, something's going wrong. That's just like your light coming on in your car. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
check the engine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that's running right. You need to check that engine.
Yeah.
And like us as men, I mentioned before, a lot of times, we got to check under the hood.
Yeah.
That's right.
We
Yeah.
got to check under the hood and see how things are going. And I found nothing better to compare or to judge ourselves, not in a condemning way, but
Mhm.
in a way of inspecting ourselves,
Mhm.
is the Word of God,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we can read the Word of God and see what position or
Mhm.
place that we're set. But I know I see the fire burning. Go ahead.
No, I also wanted to add to your statement that I'm so grateful that you brought up about the chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a perspective that we don't necessarily have the conversation about. And as you were saying that, one of the things going back to the person who may have diabetes, you don't tell them to stop taking the insulin, or a person who needs surgery, you don't tell them to not have surgery if it can help remove the ailment that they're dealing with. And that's the same for mental illness. Some individuals really do need medicine to fix that chemical imbalance. But because of our society and because of the stigmatism associated, we won't do it. And you hear about so many times of individuals like, oh, he got off his medicine and then now he's on the corner doing X, Y, and Z. But if we had that same mindset of, if I went to a doctor because my knee was hurting, or even dealing with a basic cold, like, you do things differently when you have a cold because you want to heal from it. And
Yeah.
so that's very similar to our brain. Sometimes our brain needs more than just having a conversation. It does need more than just sleeping and eating better or exercising. It needs more, and it's okay to seek that additional help, and okay to take those things.
Yes. And that's true. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's okay. And if it doesn't work the first time, I just love sharing my personal experiences. I've had many doctors over the years, and I've learned how, and that's why one of my first questions was earlier in the show was, how do you find, the right doctor?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you got to pray.
Yeah.
And again, interview them. And I had one doctor was it, and you know what? It just seems like, because we had another show, it's like I'm always bashing the doctors. I am not bashing the doctors. I'm just sharing my experiences. But there was a doctor so arrogant, like, how dare you interview me? I'm like, how dare you question that I'm interviewing you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm supposed to put my trust in you, to take care of me. So that was X'd out. I said, we're gonna save each other's
Yeah.
time because
Yeah.
I'm out. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's important. We have to realize that doctors are people. They're human too,
Mm-hmm.
and doctors see doctors. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but we have to pray. I just thank God. Once we did put that thing to some serious prayer, God
Mm-hmm.
sent a God sent doctor into
Yes.
our lives. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's been great.
Mm-hmm.
But we still need those daily things that we practice. You
Mm-hmm.
know, to keep under the hood,
Mm-hmm.
running good. So
Yeah.
do you have any other encouragement, any other um, tools, anything that you can share with us?
Yeah. So there's three that I talk about a lot, and they're simple, but we don't necessarily think of them as tools. The first one is journaling. It gives a person an opportunity just to be transparent, formulate your experiences, work through your emotions in a safe way. So I always recommend having that opportunity just to sit down by yourself and just write through what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, so that it gives you an opportunity to have a release, and you're not stuffing those experiences, and you're not allowing your brain to hold on to it and replay it over and over. So it is a easy tool and a great release. The second one, which I talk about a lot, is breathing techniques.
Mm,
And I use the 478 rule, where You hold, inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. And that actually breathing rule was so helpful for me because I was one of the individuals that struggles with anxiety. And in that anxiety realm, I realized that I wasn't breathing. And so if you're in a position where you're not breathing, go ahead and do that 4-7-8. It relaxes you. It gives your brain opportunity to, again, release things, open things up, and you be able to just think clearer and be able to function easier because you're having the right breathing. And then the last one is just basic self-care, which is watch what you're eating, your diet, exercising, drinking plenty of fluids. Sometimes we're just not drinking enough water.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
That's
Yeah,
good.
sometimes it's the simple things.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are all things that are free. Nothing that I express you have to go through.
That's true.
Yeah,
You know, you may have to buy a journal, but what, $3-4? You can find a cheap one. You can get a little notebook. It doesn't have to be fancy. But these are things that we can put into practice that really do help our emotional and mental health.
yeah. I know getting outside is and getting some natural sunlight.
Yes.
You know, that vitamin D is so important.
Yeah.
You know, some of us need some extra vitamin D, but you know, and for those that don't know, we're broadcasting out of Texas and we're getting plenty of sun right now. So I will encourage you, if you're in Texas or in the Southwest, if you want to step out and get some of that natural vitamin D, make sure you're hydrated. Don't stay out there too long.
That's right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Khmer, we appreciate you so much.
Yes. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
so excited about J Intel. Do you have any? And I know we didn't get into all the programs, so get into all the things that you have and what J Intel offers. And I'm excited, but okay, I got like 9 thoughts going through my head. Visit the site jintel.org. Okay, and I'm going to dive in. I know we looked over it briefly to get some information to interview. I just told all the secrets, right? But yeah, we can go in and get some helpful tips, get some more information. So I encourage you to do that. But do you have anything down the line that you're working on that you would like to share?
Yes. Our Living Free to Be Me program. We're having a session the end of August, September for the fall. And I spoke about that earlier. It's a 7-week program where we walk through healing from emotional wounds from previous relationships. And I love the program. Of course, I'm biased to it, but it's just a great opportunity to release some of those experiences, to get back to your authentic self, to have that self-forgiveness, to be able to identify your strengths, your capabilities, and be able to sort of nurture yourself in that way. So I definitely recommend when you go to the website, go to events and then book Living Free to Be Me and sign up for it, because it's definitely a program that will enrich your spirit. We are working through the price points, but again, affordable. We try not to make things complicated, but that's one of our programs. It's nationwide. We do it online so that you have the benefit of being able to do that in your home. You don't have to worry about trying to show up somewhere. And again, we established it in a way where it's in a group setting as well, so that you're building your own community in the process of healing.
Yeah, that's great. You know, a lot of times when people are talking, I just hear one word, you know, out of the whole conversation. I'm listening to the whole conversation, but what intrigued me with that, you said we walk through with you.
Yes.
And that is such a great thing to know, that someone can, you know, grab your hand in comfort and walk you through your situation and circumstance. Yeah. So I thank you for embracing the vision that God has given you.
Yes.
And, you know, we have to understand that where we're at now in life doesn't mean that we have to stay there, you know, and we have to also understand. I always said this from my experiences, you know, we've been homeless, we've went through a lot, but I learned to embrace it while we was in the midst of it, because I knew God would bring us out. But when we came out and he made us whole, we're able to go back in and tell people, hey, you can make it. You don't have to stay here. No matter how you made it here. So I brought that up to see that God did that with you.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I can say confidently I'm able to share these things because I've been through it, and it's coming
Yeah.
from a pure place. It's not coming
Yes.
because I'm trying to one up you and be so intelligent, but more so to give back what God gave me in the midst of my healing journey.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also too, I understand that you have a podcast.
Oh yes,
Yes.
as you can tell, I like to talk.
You just lit up with that.
Yes, yeah, it's my child actually,
Okay.
and it's been great. It's been very therapeutic for me because I share a lot of my journey and the things that I've learned. But I also invite people on the show. So we interview social workers, we interview therapists, we interview everyday overcomers. Earlier this year, we actually had someone on the show who was in a domestic violence and situation, and just hearing her story of how with God's help she was able to break free from that. And so we have people on the show that just has great insight to just really help us to walk through those difficult parts of our lives, and do it in a way again where God is holding our hand.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I don't mean to be rude or anything, but I guess we're going to invite ourselves on your podcast, because every area you mentioned, we can check. We got a little bit of God experience in there. But the podcast is called A Healing Peace
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Podcast.
Yes.
And what are the platforms you can find on?
Oh, we're everywhere. So wherever you get your music or podcast app, you'll find us. So Apple, Google, the
Spotify.
yeah, Spotify, we're there. Castbox FM, we're there. So all of those
Oh,
places.
well, we're gonna have to get with your publicist because there's a few of those that we're missing. But I tell you what, we're almost out of time, Khmer, and I knew it wasn't going to be enough time. And you have a standing invitation to come back
Yes.
on the show.
Please do.
Wasn't able to get all the comments on, but again, it's a serious topic. It's a intriguing topic. To learn about ourselves. Again, I can't say it enough. Thank you for embracing the vision that
Yes.
God has given you.
Thank
And
you.
because a lot of times we can walk in fear and say, "Oh man, I can't do this." And,
Yes.
oh yeah, so you can testify.
Oh, for
See?
sure. For sure. God is always telling me, hey, I'm with you. I'm holding your hands. Get it
Yeah,
together. But
yeah,
but again, it comes from these are not the conversations we have on a normal basis. And so am I raising my hand to have this conversation? But but God is more powerful than me, and He
Yes.
knows what I can provide and what I can't, and He's very gracious in terms of how He
Yes.
leads me in this area.
Amen.
yeah. So His grace is sufficient.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have to understand the vision and the calling is way bigger than us.
Way big.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we just have to stay humble and trust God in the midst of it. And you're doing a great job. I'm
Great.
proud of you, and we appreciate you. So, for those of corporate sponsors, we know you're watching. Get in touch. AB Khmer
Yeah.
Baker, tell her we sent you.
Yes.
Tell her we
Yeah.
sent you. And here's the email information that's on the screen. Again, be supportive. Continue to keep her in prayer.
Yes.
And we just want to thank you today for
Yes.
tuning in to Fire and Life Talk. I got some questions. I can't wait to get off the screen. I got some more questions, and we're going to have you back on. But thank you again for all the comments, for the questions on Fire and Life Talk. Thank you for the subscribers and the family and just everybody that tunes in. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Fire and Life Talk, where Jesus is Lord. If you would like more information